Over the last 3 weeks, I've given y'all the definition, the data problem, the mental health alibi, and the warning signs. But today, I want to talk about where all of these threads converge, the system. Because in the majority of femicides, particularly the ones that generate the most public shock, the system had prior contact with the situation. It could be a police call. It could be a prior charge, a protection order, a mental health hold, a family court filing. The system knew or had the information to know, and the woman died anyway. That is a systemic accountability question. And that right there, that's my lane. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva. And this is Mondays with Melba, the Femicide edition. Make sure to comment and subscribe to get more in-depth analyses as well as tools to be able to address some of the most horrible issues in our society. So, law enforcement. Domestic violence calls are among the most common calls police respond to, some of the most dangerous for law enforcement to respond to, and among the most inconsistently handled. So, lethality assessment tools exist. Problem is, they're not universally used. When they are used, the results aren't always acted on. A police response that results in no arrest, no referral, and no safety planning is a missed intervention point. Prosecution, where I spent a good chunk of my life. Domestic violence cases are dismissed at high rates, often because victims recant, often because prosecutors don't build cases that can survive without victim cooperations. The tools to prosecute these cases without victim testimony do exist. Evidence-based prosecution, so using 911 calls, medical records, photos, prior incident history, is a documented practice. However, it is not universally applied. Family court. Separation proceedings are some of the most high-risk moments in an intimate partner violence trajectory. Family courts routinely grant visitation and custody to men with documented histories of violence against the mothers of their children. Case in point, the Shreveport case. Elkins was due in family court the day after the shooting. Mental health systems. The VA released Elkins after 10 days. What did the lethality assessment look like? What was the safety plan? What was the coordination with law enforcement or the family court? These are questions the system owes the public, not because mental illness caused the shooting, but because the system had contact and the contact wasn't enough. I've spent the last several years working on prosecutorial performance indicators, measuring whether prosecutors are doing their job on the cases that matter most. Femicide and intimate partner homicide are the clearest test cases. If a jurisdiction has a pattern of dismissing domestic violence cases at high rates, declining to charge in cases with strong evidence, and failing to use evidence-based prosecution tools, that jurisdiction is producing conditions that make femicide more likely. And that right there is a prosecutorial accountability issue. Victims who report, who cooperate, who go through the system and watch their cases dismissed, yeah, those victims learn a very painful lesson, that the system will not protect them. As a result, some stop reporting, some stop leaving. Because leaving is when the danger peaks. And if the system already told you ain't nothing doing and that it's not going to intervene effectively, you do the math on your own survival. And you can't really blame folks for that. So I'm going to be direct, because the whole vague calls for awareness and resources, that's not enough. That ain't gonna cut it, all right? First off, mandatory lethality assessment at every domestic violence law enforcement contact with documented follow-through. That is a major change that has to happen. Secondly, evidence-based prosecution standards for intimate partner violence. Prosecutors trained and expected to build cases that do not entirely depend on victim cooperation. It's tough. It's not easy, but it can be done. Third, family court and criminal court data sharing. A man with a protective order should not be getting unsupervised custody, period. The courts need to talk to each other in order to prevent these type of fatal incidents. Fourth, femicide review boards in every jurisdiction. The same way we have the maternal mortality review process that examine every intimate partner homicide and ask, where were the intervention points? What did the system miss? What would have to change? And lastly, and probably most importantly, count them. Build the data infrastructure. Fund the research. Stop accepting this 30 to 40% undercount as if it's like, oh, well, it's inevitable. It is what it is, right? And when we see how on the federal level, there was that huge slashing of funding that went to community-based organizations, well, some of the folks on the ground doing this work around intimate partner violence lost half of their budget, if not more. That's not exactly the pathway to preventing femicide. And that's certainly not the way to be able to effectively count what is happening. Because if you don't have, again, coming from a data perspective, if you don't have that accurate data, you don't have the full scope of the problem, and you can't effectively allocate resources to address the problem. So this is a no-brainer. So to wrap, this series started with a number. 1 woman every 11 minutes. Femicide is not a mystery. It follows patterns we understand. It happens in systems we control. The decision to keep losing women at these rates is, at some level, a choice. Awareness is not enough. Analysis is not enough. The question is whether the people with the power to change the systems choose to do it. And that's where you, me, all of us as voters need to step in and ask those hard questions of those running for office who want our support, who want our donor dollars. Ask them straight up, what are you planning to do? And not, oh yeah, this is really important to me, big flowery letters and pronouncements. No. What concrete things are you going to push for in order to address the scourge of femicide? So I'm going to keep asking that question. And I encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to keep hearing the answers. I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva. Thank you for tuning in. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep demanding justice.